ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the 286 Project with me, Chris Akers. And on this podcast, we talk about art, culture, politics, sport, and anything else worth talking about. If you like this episode and if you like subsequent episodes, then please like, subscribe, and share, and all that good stuff. So today's guest, I asked them to come on. I'm really happy they did come on because I've been listening to the podcast for a while. They have a podcast all about film noir called Mean Streets. I would really recommend it. They'll go through various films that fit in the film noir genre and dissect them and discuss them. And I highly recommend it. And I'm going to talk to the two people who are on that podcast now. It's Matthew Booth and Luke Deckard, and they're here to talk to me now. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Chris.
Hello, Chris. Thanks for having us on.
Oh, cool.
Indeed.
So we'll start like I always start these episodes and say basically journey up until this point. So with both of you, like how did you meet and why did you decide to do a film noir podcast?
How did we meet, Matt?
I don't know how we met.
So, yeah,
I,
it's got to be through the Sherlock community because I wrote some Sherlock books ages ago, and you were in the Sherlock Holmes Society of London, and
yeah,
it had to have been through that at some
must have been,
point,
must have been, because
well over a decade ago.
well over a decade ago. And then Luke had a YouTube channel of his own, and I guested on that a couple of times. And one of the episodes was about film noir.
Yeah.
And did we talk for 3 hours? 3 hours plus?
Yeah, well, we had this incredibly crazy idea where we thought we'll talk film noir, but like we'll cover all film noir. And so we tried to watch like I don't know, 5 or 6 different films and talk about them all in depth, which led to like a 3 hour long or so episode there, which is a bit nuts. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And it sort of went from there, didn't it? Then you,
yeah, because I was really bored with my show. I wasn't really having fun with it, and being solo was kind of a drag, and finding guests was a drag. And I thought, let's do something that like the two of us like. And I thought that really worked. And here we are. We're in our second year. This April will be our 2 year birthday of Mean
yeah,
Streets.
Cool, cool. So for those that might have a vague idea of what film noir is, because what's interesting about your podcast is you don't just cover what people deem noir from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. You cover modern films that have noir aesthetic. So you've covered Drive on your podcast, and you've got Hell and High Water on your podcast as well.
hmm
So more modern noir. So how would you well, first of all, why is it about noir that you like, and how would you actually define noir?
Dear.
Well, I always define noir as originally it was just a style. The actual genre for me was crime fiction and crime movies, and noir was just a way of telling a crime story. Um, Heavily influenced by German expressionism, so it was all you start off in the dark and you bring up the lights very slowly, and that's how you light it rather than the other way around.
Mm.
And shots from below and at quirky angles and things like that. All of which was taken from films like M, Metropolis, things like that.
Yeah.
Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Um, and it was just a way of telling a particular type of crime story. You know, in essence, the American type of crime story rather than the British. So the British is very traditional whodunits and you know blood on the roses and things like that, and poisoned teacups. Whereas the American style of detective thriller was much grittier and much more realistic, and lent itself to noir. Um, and that really, for me, is what the foundations of film noir is. It's that particular way of telling a particular type of story. Uh, Luke, anything to build on that?
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely agree with all that. I think for me, noir, when you get past the German expressionism stuff, I always see it more as it's a certain kind of attitude, and social awareness. I think for me, most film noir is in the traditional sense is kind of a an extension of the hard boiled novel. You know, your Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett's, like that sort of, those were some of the early, you know, adaptations, and you know, or the noir staples. So I've always sort of seen noir as more a an attitude, and a sort of, you know, yeah, almost like a, I don't know, like a mode in which you can sort of explore, you know, socio political commentary, and do it in a flashy and cinematic and visually engaging way, using that German expressionism. And you know, again, when we, you know, not, you know, a film isn't noir just because it's black and white. There are black and white films that have German expressionism, but they're not considered film noir.
Mm.
Film noir typically, you know, is boiled down to crime thrillers or some sort of, you know, crime element, or some sort of, you know, some sort of conundrum for an individual who's going through some sort of, you know, uh, existential crisis, or something along those lines. And yeah, so I think it's hard to really define it, because you know, there's some people who have like quite rigid definitions, that if it doesn't end with, you know, the protagonist in a state of complete ruin, then it's not noir. You know, it has to, you know. And I'm like, well, that's a very sort of contained and confined definition of it, but you know, we're over 100 years later from the birth of the hard-boiled novel, and that genre is by far the most influential in crime fiction today. You see hard-boiled elements throughout loads of different subgenres of crime fiction, and it's quite a malleable genre. And I think you have the same thing with film noir. It you can apply it to something like Blade Runner. You can apply it to something like John Wick. You can apply it to all sorts of different, you know, The Nice Guys, which is a buddy comedy, goofy but noir elements to it. So yeah, so for me, it's just these sort of this sort of attitude of sort of, I don't know, disillusionment, existential crisis, you know, sort of individual down on their luck, fighting against a system that is ultimately too big to defeat. That's my
Yeah.
long-winded definition.
Yeah. Oh, but I mean, we've done an episode on the Terminator, you know,
Mm.
which
Yeah.
has got, I mean, that's a sci-fi action thriller,
Mhm.
but it's heavily influenced by noir. You know, the aesthetic of the Terminator is pure noir, you know,
Right.
and again, it's like Luke says, the the system that the man is up against, or the character is up against, that he's almost got no chance of beating because it's so big and it's bigger than he is. That's the Terminator and Kyle Reese. You know, it's a metaphor for the same sort of struggle that a noir hero goes through. So, you know, it does. It starts for me with German expressionism, but obviously it evolves to what we have today. But the core ingredients of it are the same, and those are the ones that Luke's mentioned.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the Terminator, because one way you can tell he was heavily influenced by noir is actually the bar where the Terminator and Sarah Connor meet for the first time, because you remember
Yes.
the name of
Yeah,
it, it's called Tech Noir. So
Yeah.
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
So he's
Yeah.
heavily influenced.
Signposted its genre in
Yeah.
the actual film. This is what it is,
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Uh,
Luke's right. It doesn't have to be, you know, a man in a trilby and a trench coat in black and white. You know, I mean, Chinatown is a neo noir, and that's brilliant sunshine almost all the way through. You know, but
Mhm.
at the heart of it, it's as dark as it can be. You know, and that's the noir bursting through the sunshine. So people do have I don't know, a sort of almost cliched version of what film noir is, and they think it is just all those old 1940s black and white films, and it's not. It's much more far-reaching than that, which is something we try and address, don't we, on the old podcast?
Indeed.
yeah. It's interesting you say that they doesn't have to be filmed in dark, because one of my favorite reviews that you did on your podcast was of Strange Darling, which is a
Oh,
brilliant film, but it's actually very brightly shot. But there's a lot of darkness that goes into that, and I take it that's
Yeah,
what something like you mean, where it's not so much the aesthetic of it, although I think that's an important part of it. It's the darkness from the characters, from the situation that
yeah,
occurs throughout the film.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, that's a good example of it. Yeah, where it's that film is very colorful. They're deep saturations. The reds really pop. The greens really it's all very vivid. But then you have those really great moments like in the when they're sitting in the truck at the very beginning, and that deep neon blue that is covering them both. And then but the shadows inside the cab of the truck are very dark. Almost you can't see through them. Yeah, that's I mean that's but also I mean another one comes to mind is Miami Vice. You can't
Mm.
get much brighter than sunny Miami in the 80s with pastel
Yeah.
clothes and stuff. That and that's a series where on the surface it's pop culture reference point is basically kind of a joke, and that's looking at the hair and the clothes of the era, when actually episode by episode it's very dark.
Mm.
Thematically, it's very dark, and what the characters are going through is classic noir rigmarole every week.
Yeah, the pilot of Miami Vice could easily be a cinema release.
Mm,
No, there's no doubt about it.
yeah, it's better than the actual film.
It's better. Yeah, exactly.
We'll
Yeah.
get there though.
Well, there's rumors are looking to do another version of Miami Vice the film as well. Apparently, was it Glenn Powell and Michael B. Jordan? And well,
I heard. I think Glenn Powell was a one. I think that name was floated at one point, and I would really hope that is not the case. But I saw Michael B. Jordan, who he would be cool as Tubbs, and Austin Butler as
Yeah,
Crockett.
okay.
That
and I
would
think that
actually
would
be.
work.
I would be there for that.
I'd,
I would
I'd
be
be
there
right
for
on
that.
board for those two,
Yeah,
sort of resurrecting it. Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Again, with and probably this is more about the state of cinema in general, but it seems like another film noir that's filmed today, and again, Strange Darling is a case of point of this. Seems to be more from the independent American scene and like other countries like South Korea and Japan, as opposed to the more commercial American film scene, with some exceptions like a David Fincher, for instance. Would that be a fair point to say? And what does that say about the state of cinema in Hollywood in general? Because I think there's been a lot of good American independent films, but not so much when it comes to Hollywood animation.
I agree. I think it's really complex. I think because every once in a while you'll get a film you're like, how the hell did that get made? Like Caught Stealing, one
Yeah,
of my
I was
favorite films of last year.
mine too.
Noir, neo noir through and through. I think if this film would have come out in 1998, it would be a classic up there with Seven. It is so good. The
Yeah,
performances are insanely good. Um, it's visually amazing. It's good to look at. It's yeah. So but I don't know. Hollywood is so focused at the moment on and this has been the conversation for again well over a decade, and that is they are only interested in popular IP. I mean, you could, for a laugh, you can always go and check out some videos by Red Letter Media where they make fun of this, and they kind of poke at the different films that are coming out that are based on board games, and it's just so everything is so focused on IP. It's like, oh, okay, here's another Star Wars film, here's another this, here's another that. It's when you look back in the 80s and the 90s and 70s and so on, yes, there were a lot of IP. There was a lot of IP mining, but there was a lot of risks taken on new stories and presenting new stories to the to the population and to the world. Nowadays it's so, market research says this, the data says this, let's just stick with this because this is what, look at the new Avengers movie. They're digging up every corpse they could possibly
yeah,
grab to put them in this film because it's Marvel's and Disney's last attempt to scoop in a bunch of money before they have to like actually seriously work on fixing their franchise. Um, so a lot of it is risk aversion. A lot of it they just don't want to put the money, put the effort, and take the risk on something brand new. I mean, it's been said for years that the whatever our generation Star Wars is not going to get made because no one will take a risk on something like that. And I think that's quite sad. So yes, you end up seeing a lot of independent stuff like Strange Darling, but I think you also see more noir on the small screen.
mhm,
When we covered things like Sugar which is in my opinion fantastic, on Apple TV. Slow Horses is on Apple TV as well. Very very spy noir. The Lowdown on Disney Plus,
Yeah.
Stroke FX is absolutely fantastic. Um, so there's quite a bit of noir out there, but it is not on the big screen as much as it would what it used to be back in the day.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. I mean, I've very little to add to that because I think it's absolutely right. And one of the sad things about being a man of of my years is that I now see those. I mean, I grew up at a time when the first three Star Wars films were coming out. The first Indiana Jones film came out, and you'd not seen anything like it. I start to see all those things that I loved when I was 8, 9, 10 now being mined for all the worth and trodden into the ground. And that's for a film fan like me, that's sad. When you see your childhood heroes just sort of totally washed away for the sake of a book, I think that's really sad. And I think, I count myself lucky that we were in that generation. I was in that generation of where new characters people were willing to take risk on new characters, and new characters were coming along,
Mm.
and you were seeing something you hadn't seen. Whereas Luke's right, the current generation have just got almost in very broad brush, like the sort of fag end of ours, and
Mm.
there's nothing for them to
Mm.
latch onto. Even the superhero films, the popular superheroes are from the 30s and the 40s,
Mhm.
60s at the latest, perhaps with Spider-Man. And I suppose the X-Men, Wolverine's a bit later than that, but still, you're talking the 70s, aren't you? Late 60s, early 70s.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's just sad that there's nothing, no one's got the guts to take a risk on something brand new because there's loads of stuff out there that you could adapt for the screen. You talk about people talk about wanting a female James Bond. Well, there's Modesty Blaze, for example.
Mhm.
Just go back and adapt some of those because they are a female James Bond.
Mm.
You don't need to be mining all this stuff that has been around for decades. Do something new. Do something new. And I agree about Court Stealing. I think that was certainly one of the best films of last year. And it was by comparison to what Hollywood thinks it should be doing, it was relatively small, independent, and sort of the man in the street won't know about it. And that's tragic. That's really
Yeah.
tragic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems that way like with films. I mean, one of the reasons I wouldn't know about it's not just because of promotion, but movies aren't in cinemas a lot anymore. Like they got
No.
a best like a 2 maybe 3 week window, and then they're just gone, discarded.
Yeah, and when I remember going to see Superman the movie with Christopher Reeve about like 7 times because it was on for months, literally months, because it was still making a lot of money, so they kept it on. At the box office, they just kept it open. Same with Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Temple of Doom. I think I saw countless times before it was finally taken off the cinema screen.
Yeah.
In Manchester. So, but you're right. Now it's on for a couple of days and then it's gone, which again is a sad thing. We talked about this, haven't we, Luke?
Mm.
Sad that people, the cinema seems to be strangled by
Yeah.
streaming.
Yeah. Well, we talked about the WB Netflix merger and our reluctance with that. I mean, the Netflix model I think is so ridiculous, and it's one that I absolutely detest. And I think they recently were saying that if I don't know, sure if this is actually like the legit thing that's going to happen, but there was speculation that Netflix would give films like a 2 or 3 week window. It's like a 17-day window or something like that. And that to me is just like, what's the point? What's the point? Like, I don't know. It's killed the experience of streaming has killed the experience of going to the cinema. It's killed the social aspect, and all of these streamers,
Mhm.
mostly Netflix, really have this weird idea that everyone just wants to be at home and isolated. And
Mm.
art is a very communal activity. You don't see this happening with sports. I mean, sports like since the birth of HBO, and you've had fights on on HBO, and you've had all these different games, and the whole thing was you and your friends pool your money together, you buy the fight so you can get pizzas. It was all about coming together and doing the thing, because maybe you can't actually go to the place, but you can live, that atmosphere out at home with your friends. But you're not doing that when you're watching stupid Stranger Things. You're at home or you're watching it on your phone while you're on the train.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, I was on the train today watching an episode of something. I wasn't doing it in collaboration with someone else. I was just, and I think that's what Netflix doesn't understand. And there's something really energizing about seeing a film with people in that atmosphere, in the way that going to a sporting event, going to a concert, going to a museum, going out and experiencing something. And it's
Yeah.
like we're taking away social experiences, and I just think that is a travesty with with streaming that it drives me nuts.
Yeah. And as a sort of extension from that, what drives me nuts about streaming is that it's taken away what people used to call the water cooler moment,
Mhm.
Yeah.
where you'd watch. I mean, my profound memory of the water cooler moment, my sort of personal experience of that, was when Twin Peaks was first aired
Mhm.
in sort of 1991 or whatever it was in this country, and I would go to school the next day after watching the episode on Tuesday night. Wednesday morning was, did you watch it last night, Mike? What's all that about? How are they going to get from there to there? What's he doing with that necklace or whatever it might be?
Mm.
The question now isn't, did you see it last? Now it's, where are you up to?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And if the person you ask has only watched 2 episodes and you've watched 5, you can't talk about it.
Mm.
And it's killed that anticipation for next week, because all you've
Yeah.
got to do is crack open another beer and it's on.
Mhm.
And
Which
I think that's a real shame. It's that sort of eagerness for next week to find out what happens next, and spending all that week theorizing about it with your friends. This is the social thing Luke's talking about. And then the next week, all your theories are blown out of the water because the writers have done something clever. And then you know,
Yeah.
you repeat to fade until the end of the series. That's
Yeah.
that's gone. That's
Which reminds me again, like I mean, one of the pros of certain streaming platforms like Netflix and even Paramount is that they do release their episodes weekly. So things like Sugar and Slow Horses and Dexter and all those, they do actually release those weekly, which is a wise thing to do, because the problem with, particularly with the Netflix model, both having these condensed theatrical releases, and then this big bang on streaming, you know means that your the discussion very quickly vanishes,
mm,
very quickly. You have with Stranger Things, you have a 8 week period of, or no, not even 8 week period. You have a like an 8 day or a couple of day period where everyone watches all of it. Social media is buzzed for 8 days or so, and then they move on and they forget about it. We're back in the day, you would have, your normal TV show would be 20 some odd episodes, so you'd have 20 some odd weeks with breaks for Christmas and New Year's and all that kind of
yeah,
stuff going on, talking about it. Or you'd have your film that would be in the cinema for, I mean, what Titanic was in the cinema for what, like forever and a day, you know?
yeah,
And then after that, then you have 2 or 3 months of anticipation because it's going to come out on VHS, it's going to come out on DVD, and then you have a whole nother bang of marketing and getting the word out there, which with streaming you just don't have. So things that could have snowballed into life and become bigger and more popular lose that opportunity
mm,
because the streaming model just doesn't allow room for anything to breathe.
yeah. And it becomes the sort of cinematic or screen equivalent of fast food.
Yes.
You eat, you watch it, you gorge on it, you consume it, and it's gone.
Yeah.
And the next one will come along, and it'll probably be the same sort of stuff, and you can do it all again. Whereas I absolutely agree with Luke. If a TV series again, I go back to Twin Peaks. There was something like 20 odd episodes in that second series.
Mm,
That is all like that's a long time of anticipation to see how it's going to resolve.
mm,
And then to use the fast food analogy, with something like that, you've got a meal in front of you that you take your time over and you enjoy, and every mouthful is, you know, an experience. Whereas with streaming, or certainly with Netflix, you just seem to be throwing it down, as quickly as you can. And I just think it's a shame because my view is that, and my experience is that most things, most art takes time to really like linger in your memory and for you to really get to the heart of. That's why I keep going back to crime fiction, crime novels that I've read, because there's always something more to be got out of it. Same with crime cinema, crime fiction cinema, film noir, whatever you want to talk about. People don't just look at the Mona Lisa and say, "Oh, well, that's good." People they
Yeah.
study it, they look at it, they go into the depths of it.
mm,
Can't do that if it's there and gone in a week, or
Mm.
8 days or whatever. And I think it's sort of, is it dumbing down? I don't know what it is, but it's certainly becoming to me like fast food.
yeah.
I agree with you both on that. I would offer two rays of light on that. The first one
Please
is
do.
in terms of combating it. The first one is I was thinking this the other day because Netflix still want the recognition, they still want the Oscars, they still want it.
Hmm.
So I'm wondering if people like the people who organise the Oscars or the BAFTAs or any of these other major awards, if they could, I don't know, amend their rules somewhat, because they still have to have a theatrical release now, but it's you just have a theatrical release. You do that for a couple of days, and it just
Exactly.
be classed as a theatrical release. So they could amend the rules saying it has to be in a cinema for and so many screens for a certain amount of time, and then there has to be like a gap between a cinema
Mm,
release and streaming. That's one way they could combat it. Because then, if that cost Netflix awards, they'd be more likely to do it. I think that's one way. And I think the other way is actually directors. You've heard Christopher Nolan, I think, came out, was it this week or the week before, saying, I'm never going to do a film with Netflix because he wants that theatrical release.
Mm,
Zach Krieger, who obviously directed Weapons, I think said the same thing, hence why I think he's more likely to sign with Paramount. And I think the Duffer Brothers have just signed a deal with Paramount, even
hmm.
though they've just done Stranger Things. And that may be a reason why. So I think I don't like that deal, but I think there's rays of light.
mm,
I personally was also, I don't know if you two agree, in terms of terrestrial TV and whatnot, a lot of what we learn about movies is on podcasts, which is great, but I can't remember the last time I saw a program on TV, or especially terrestrial TV, that was focused on film. Be like film with Barry Norman, or
Mm.
used to be one in the
yeah,
90s. I used to go up, it's called Movies, which was about movie reviews on a Saturday. I can't remember the last time there was a program strictly on movies at all.
yeah. Well, that's the other thing, of course, that cinema does. Part of the joy of going to the cinema is the trailers for me. And to see what's up and coming. And there have been times when I've been in the cinema and thought, huh, I wish I was watching that one instead of the one I'm about to watch. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? So, but yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, film with Barry Norman, film whatever year, film 89, film 90, film was an absolute must for me. When I was growing up, because it was a way of saying, oh, well, that's coming, so I'll keep a note and look out for that being released. And then you would see it. You would see TV spots. You would hear radio spots. And there would be a period of anticipation for it being released. I remember Batman 89. I was beside myself, uh, waiting for that to come to my cinema, my local cinema, or at least one in the city centre of Manchester.
Mm.
And I couldn't wait. And when it finally arrived, it was sold out for the first month. So you couldn't get in. So there was even more anticipation. And I miss those days, quite frankly.
Mm. Well, we
yeah,
have there's so many options, which is also the problem. Everything is in competition with itself now.
Yeah.
That makes some of that quite difficult, and people don't watch TV like they used to. So they're not necessarily tuning into BBC One or Channel 4 or whatever like you would have done back in the day where those ads or those programs would reach the right people. I mean, it is, nowadays, yes, your film education, is coming from YouTubers, or it's coming from podcasts and stuff like that. I mean, I learned a lot of different, certain films and shows that I learn about through Red Letter Media, or that's one of my favorite YouTubers that I like to listen to because they're not idiots. So so you sort of, or y'all listen to, Kermode and Mayo. I like listening
Yeah,
to
I
them. So
listen to Croydon.
that's kind of, you don't have the opportunity. There's no real. I almost feel like there's no real market for a terrestrial TV show that is dedicated to that stuff. I mean, Kermode used to have that, but that's gone. You know what I mean?
Mm.
But I think that's just the way everything is moved away from, people aren't watching those things on TV. They're watching it on their phones, and YouTube and stuff so on are the bigger platforms. But at the same time, advertising, I mean, streaming was the glories of streaming in the early days was that, oh cool, I can watch all this stuff. There's no ads. I don't have to pay for cable. I don't have to pay for, Sky. And now we're right back to where we started.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
goddamn McDonald's ads playing,
yeah,
interrupting your episode on streaming, that, you're like, when I first started paying for this, the promise was no commercials, and yet here we are.
yeah, yeah.
Which, can be quite can be quite frustrating. So, those networks aren't going to produce a, they don't have the interest to produce a show that talks about the latest films, because that is essentially advertising competition, which is unfortunate. Um, you know, so yeah, I think where we are with podcasts and various YouTube channels, are is kind of the only viable way to even continue those discussions, because people aren't watching TV like they used to.
Which in itself is sad,
Yeah.
but yeah, maybe Luke's right. Maybe we are the Barry Normans of our generation, sort of thing, and this is the way we get information out to people about films. I mean, we've had feedback from people who've listened to our podcast that have said, "I didn't know about this film, and I just watched it because of your podcast, and I absolutely love it." You
Mm,
know, I think Hell and High Water was one of those from somebody.
hmm.
Uh, and you think, well, that's a little bit of good in the world that we've managed to achieve,
Mm,
and if you could scale that up, then I think the world would be a better place, quite honestly.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like Caught Stealing, The Nice Guys, all these films that you're like, I don't understand how these weren't massive.
Yeah,
They needed this. They needed some sort of extra boost to, you know, reach more people, and it just, where do you do that in this cluttered market of copious streaming, copious YouTube channels, copious podcasts? There's a lot of competition, which it makes it very difficult.
Yeah. I think what's sad for me, and I'll use Strange Darling as an example. Um, I think I recommended you both a film a few weeks ago, The Vast of Night, as a sci-fi example as
Yes,
well.
yeah,
that was great. I loved that, by the way. That was fantastic.
Yeah, good, great film, great independent films.
Mm,
And then you
yeah.
think the directors, I go on Wikipedia and look at directors and think, oh, okay, well, this is what they've done, and it looks really good. And challenge us to watch it, and you think, why are they not being given a chance? Why are you
yes.
giving a chance to
Exactly.
people who have gone straight out of film school, who almost bang, 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 and not really putting any thought into it? There have been exceptions, like Denis Villeneuve, if you look at some of the early stuff, was brilliant. But obviously, I don't see a lot of directors who have like done that on the independent scene, and then when it comes to a commercial scene, they've been given that real chance to really impress and with like a
Hmm.
bigger budget. I think it's sad, really.
It is. Well, I mean, you take Marvel as the example. I mean, those aren't directors; those are babysitters. I mean, I recently watched for the first time Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and I was skeptical. I hated the first one. I didn't really care for Doctor Strange and the Infinity War stuff. Cumberbatch just wasn't really doing it for me. Um, but look, Sam Raimi directed the second one. I thought, over Christmas, all right, let's give it a go, and that is a film that's very much, I feel like, in like it's fighting with itself, where there are elements where it's like this really wants to be an authentic Sam Raimi movie, but it is battling the fact that it's also an MCU movie. And it has to be MCU and it can't be Sam Raimi. And there's this tug of war throughout the whole thing where some bits are really great. Genuinely, I was like surprised and loved a fair amount of that film. But then also there was that inevitable drawback of this is another, this has to be another MCU movie. It can't
Yeah.
just be it can't just be a Sam Raimi
Yeah.
movie in the way that his first two Spider-Man films were. And I say first two intentionally because the third one is an Avi Arad film.
Yeah. But I mean, those first two Spider-Man films show that you can have Sam Raimi films
Mm.
that are also superhero films,
Yeah.
and the two can coexist. And I mean, there's the scene in Spider-Man 2 where Dr. Octopus is essentially created when he's in the hospital.
Oh, pure horror.
That is pure horror. That's
Love
the Evil Dead in all but name.
Yeah.
A sequence from the Evil Dead in all but name. And Luke's gonna have to jog my aged memory on it. But what was the Shane Black film we did not so long ago that was
Play Dirty.
Play Dirty? Well, that suffered from the same thing, I think, didn't it?
Mm.
That you wanted it to be a Shane Black film, but it had to be a Netflix film.
It's a Mark Wahlberg film, is what that was.
Yeah. So,
Ugh.
because we're big Shane Black fans, but this wasn't a Shane Black film. It was something else, and it was a sort of hybrid, and it didn't work for us. It didn't work, and I think that's a similar point about what you said about Doctor Strange. You want it to be a Sam Raimi film with superheroes in it. You don't want it to be an
Kevin
MCU
Feige movie
film with Sam Raimi strangled half to death in creativity.
Yes, yeah.
Indeed. Matt, you talked earlier in an interview about the difference between American films, like the film noir films, and how Britain did like the crime films, whereas like the Poison Tea, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But obviously there was a change, obviously where there was elements of that came into British films, I imagine. When did that change start to happen?
Well, it starts. I mean, the sort of golden age is from, the golden age of detective fiction is sort of in between the two wars, and then really we never got out of it in terms of literature. So we're still sort of writing them. I mean, I write them myself, but we're still writing those. But in terms of cinema, I think there was a shift mid 60s, certainly into the early 70s. I mean, you get films like Get Carter, which is unashamedly Brit noir, and films like The Long Good Friday, and all those that started to say, I think there was a change in British cinema when the kitchen sink drama happened. So think films like Saturday Night and Sunday Morning and Billy Liar, where they became less about people who spoke the BBC Queen's English with that clipped accent, and they became about people from Manchester, back streets in places like Salford and Moss Side and all those, and the same for Yorkshire. So films like A Kind of Loving and all those sort of mid-60s black and white kitchen sink dramas. And I think crime cinema took that baton. So you start to get films like I say Get Carter, but there are films in the middle of that still are a bit whodunity, but they are starting to get a bit more serious. So there are films like this is slightly earlier than the period I'm talking about. There's a film called Sapphire, which deals very heavily with racism in quite a sort of upfront way for the time, and that would have shocked a lot of audiences. And there's a film called Victim with Dirk Bogarde that does the same for homosexuality. And I think the British crime film is starting to do it, from the 60s onward. But then when you get to Get Carter and The Long Good Friday, you really do start to see, and then it drips into TV with things like the Sweeney, where it's not about, up until the Sweeney, we had Dixon of Dock Green, who always did the right thing and always got his man, or you had endless Sherlock Holmes TV series in the 60s where Holmes always solves the case. Suddenly you've got Jack Regan, who A, doesn't always do the right thing, and B, sometimes doesn't get his man. And that then fed into the sort of 80s in British cinema and TV. But we've now gone back, I think. We're now going back to the golden age in Britain. And I'm a fan of both, so this isn't a criticism. I'm a fan of both types. But it comes to something when our most popular crime detective series export now is Midsummer Murders,
Yeah.
which is pure. I mean, I'm not even going to say it's pure Agatha Christie because it's not as deep as Agatha Christie. It's pure. It's a game of Cluedo every Sunday night for 2 hours,
Mm.
and it's no deeper than that, I don't think. And it doesn't. That again, that's not really a criticism because it doesn't pretend to be. It's not. It's not pretending to tell you anything about the human condition or your social society problems. It's going to entertain you for 2 hours to take your mind off those things, and there is a place for that in my book. But you know, it's not reflective of who we are. You have to, if you accept it for that, it can be good fun. If you're
Mm.
not willing to, it's appalling. you know. Um, but yeah, I to answer the question in a nutshell, I think you're talking sort of the 60s into the early 70s when it really shifted into away from that Dixon of Dock Green type policeman
Mhm.
into Jack Regan, and even focusing on gangsters like Frank Carter, and Bob Hoskins in The Long Goodbye, whose character name escapes me for the moment. But uh, that's when I think it started to shift.
Okay, cool. Interesting. We've just talked about Britain there, and obviously there's elements that they've taken and then they've still gone back to like what it used to be before. Outside of the Anglosphere, are there any countries you look at and you think, oh, their movies are basically there's difference between them, but they've really taken that element of film noir and turned it up a notch? I mean, I'm
I don't
thinking. I
know.
mean, obvious one I'm thinking of is South Korea because I'm a big fan of being a big fan of Korean cinema for about the last 25 years.
Yeah, and there is such a thing as Scandi noir.
Yeah,
So the
yeah,
Scandinavian countries, and some of those really are superb.
Yeah.
Some
I
of
don't know if
those are
they've taken
really
it up a
dark.
notch though, but I would say they're utilizing the genre very
Oh yes, they've not taken
effectively.
it up anything. They've just taken it and doing it well.
Yeah.
yeah. Cool. So, which directors now would you associate with this genre? Because I know for people like Fincher, for instance, is an obvious same one, but there must be others similar to when it was back then. There must have been directors back then where you think, oh, that film's going to be like this if I film it like that. Are there any particular directors where you think actually they capture that essence of it really well?
Today,
Mm,
that's really hard.
Yeah, I
I mean,
struggle.
even when we think about, even if we just move away from film noir and we just talk movies in general, I'll go back to digging on Marvel because that's always fun to do. But like a Marvel movie just looks like a Marvel movie. It doesn't look like a director's vision.
yeah.
Outside of Iron Man 1, none of those films look like they're a director's vision. Not a single one. And I think that's quite disappointing. You could maybe argue Guardians of the Galaxy, but like when they go back, when they have Earth moments on Guardians of the Galaxy, it's just another Marvel movie. It's just the same flat colors, flatness. You know, yeah. I mean, David Fincher's still a name who's around, but like he's just a Netflix boy now, and that's really disappointing because he should be cinema guy. He should be doing big cinema stuff. Um, I don't think there's anyone at the moment who is wearing some sort of like this is the style, this is X's style. We sort of don't have that when it comes to films at the moment. On what I mean in like in the Hollywood sphere. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
yes, we go to like JT Molnar's Strange Darling. Well, that is heavily stylized and that's really great and you can probably expect something similar from from his next one. Or was it Ryan Cool. Oh, what's his name? What's his name? Ryan. I'm gonna say it wrong. I'm gonna look it up.
Wait,
Ryan Coogler. You know,
right, cool.
his stuff, Sinners, you know, Creed, you know, that maybe you
Yeah.
can, that's going to be that guy's style. But when it comes to the crime sphere, I don't know. I
No,
I I really, I think you see more originality more in the miniseries approaches, whether that's Peaky Blinders or Ripper Street or Sugar or I don't know, Slow Horses, or
mm,
even, you know, I don't know, Dexter, the the lowdown. That's where, you know, you're getting more of that kind of stuff. You know, I mean, even the last few Bond films, just they look kind of boring. You know, they weren't.
yeah.
You know, they might have a cool action scenes, but even, you know. You know, once Skyfall came out, that just became the new Bond, and then Skyfall, Spectre looked like Skyfall, and even though Sam Mendes didn't direct No Time to Die, No Time to Die looked like those other two films, which looked nothing or felt nothing like Casino Royale or who's he? What's the next one? Quantum of
Quantum of
Solace.
Solace. Yeah.
Um, you know, there's no sort of finally landed on one. There's no sort of um like you know, like the Jason Bourne films.
Yeah.
They had their style and their look. And Paul Greengrass, who took over the franchise after the first one, you know, kind of elevated what was done in the first one, and then, you know, you really solidified the Bourne style, I think. But we don't have. There's not anything like that right now. You could maybe at a stretch argue John Wick,
Mm,
maybe,
Mm.
maybe.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think in terms of having a real style of their own and a vision of their own that they stick to, I genuinely think the last greatest one we had was David Lynch,
Mm.
and I would certainly say that some of his stuff, Mulholland Drive, for me, is one of the best neo noirs ever made. I think it's got everything that noir should have,
Mm.
and I maintain, I've said this several times on our podcast, I maintain that if you watch that carefully, it's got a very coherent storyline, and it's very easy to follow, but you have to have your wits about you.
Mm.
And I think cinema that makes you have to concentrate and watch and not be doom scrolling while you're watching it is no bad thing. If you've got to sit down for 2 hours and really watch it and experience it to get something out of it, I don't think that's a bad thing. And Lynch was famously against people watching movies on mobile phones, you know, famously and verbally sort of annoyed about it. And I agree with him. You know, I agree with him. That's not the forum to watch a movie, I don't think. Um,
No.
so in terms of directors who have a real style of their own and a vision of their own that can handle noir, I've not really seen one that makes me get excited since David Lynch,
Mm.
you know.
Mm.
And we're talking however many years ago Mulholland Drive was.
Yeah.
I say that as a Lynch fan. I am a Lynch fan, but I really don't think there's anything. There's no true cinema voice that's true to itself, no matter what the critics say.
Yeah.
Since
Mm. Maybe.
since him,
It's complicated because there are directors that have style, but there's directors who have style but aren't necessarily doing crime or noir or
oh
neo
yeah, yeah,
noir. So
yeah,
like, I mean, I'm thinking of like Edgar Wright has a very specific style. You could maybe argue Nicholas Winding Refn, who did Drive. A lot of his
yeah.
subsequent films have a Nicholas Winding Refn style, but the films are nowhere near as good as Drive. Drive, I think, is his best. Um, you know, so it's complicated because there you know, there are directors who have a good style that's kind of unique to them, but but when it comes, if we're talking specifically on the, you know, crime, film noir, neo noir sphere, there's not a particular director that comes to mind as, oh, this is the leading this is the leading, voice. This is the Spielberg of this genre right now. I struggle to think of who that,
Yeah,
could be.
yeah, and there are certain directors that I say, oh, if it's a so and so film, I'll give it a watch. You know, so I mean, if it's Hitchcock, I'll give it a. Almost certainly going to watch it. If it's Spielberg, if it's Lynch, if it's you know, can't think of another. But
Mm,
if there is certain directors that I think that's going to be worth watching.
mm,
Sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes it's dreadful, but sometimes for the most part it works out. I can't think of a director now that makes me go, I'll go and see that because it's him.
mm,
Very very few. And genuinely, I can't think of any actors that make me really say, oh, so and so. Whereas once upon a time, I would say it's a Harrison Ford film. It's probably going to be worth watching.
mm.
You know, um, very few actors that I could say that about now as well. To be quite honest, I think the days of movie stars are gone.
Yeah.
Genuinely,
Or they're on hold. I think
or
we'll
they're on
get back to
hold.
it. We'll
That's
get
a better
back
way of
to it.
putting it.
But
Yeah,
at the moment, I think what was it? Was it Tarantino? Was it Tarantino said we don't have movie stars anymore? We just have superheroes.
yeah. I think it was actually.
Chris Evans isn't a star. Captain America is a star.
Yeah,
Robert Downey Jr. isn't even he's not even Robert Downey Jr. anymore. He is just Iron Man.
yeah. That's true. That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
And they don't do things anymore. Well, they don't seem to do things anymore. Like I remember Harrison Ford doing Witness in 1985. So he's only really been Indiana Jones and Han Solo to the
Mm.
to
And
the
Blade Runner, he's been Rick Deckard.
to the wider, and suddenly he's doing this very sort of serious, human, intelligent cop drama, and people were losing their minds at the time. So, what's he talking about? He's only good for being in space or cracking a whip. What's he on about? And he's absolutely brilliant in it, So, and then they say, "Oh, actually, he's pretty good."
Mm.
Then he starts to do a mix of everything. He does a popcorn thriller, and then the next film is the Mosquito Coast or whatever. You know what I mean? And there aren't many actors I can think of now that do that. That will just do what interests them. There will be some. I'm sure there are some. But like you say, Lee, Robert Downey Jr. is now just Iron Man,
Mm.
and he's
And we're
happy
still
to
waiting on
be.
that third Sherlock movie.
Oh, don't get me started on those. um, but yeah, and they just seem to be like the actor that is then just in a film. They're not actually being actors; they are just being the name,
Mm.
and that seems to be enough these days.
No, it was like the kid who was Han Solo in the new that Solo Star Wars movie from a few years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah,
He's just it's just Solo, it's just Han Solo. There's no, oh yeah, that guy.
yeah. I can't remember his name.
I can't either. I feel really bad. But it's a case in point. Like these things aren't making household names. You
No.
know, like I can't remember the guy's name in Andor, the guy who plays the main guy in Andor, whose name is what's his name? Andor. His name, the character's name is Andor.
Is that
Like
Diego Luna, I think his name?
maybe that sounds about right.
Yeah.
But like that franchise, Rogue One and Andor hasn't made him this name. He is. It's just, oh, that's Andor. It's just the character. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah, yeah.
the one of, I mean, yeah. So it's common. I guess you got people like Timothy Chalamet, who's who's more closer to a typical Hollywood star, despite me
Mm.
disliking everything that he's been in, because I he is severely overrated. But it's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are some, and I just don't know they are. But on a sort of, like I say, broad brush, it seems to be no one really cares about those sort of things anymore. And if they make a superhero film, they're sort of happy to be that superhero for the rest of their career.
Yeah, well, they're happy to do that because that's the job, and that's their it's their money, that's their way of living.
Mm.
The problem is we don't have. I mean, Robert Pattinson, despite being in Twilight, is a fantastic actor. He is a
Yes,
really good actor. He's good in
yes.
Batman. He's good in Tenet. He's good in lots of different things.
In the Lighthouse.
Lighthouse. But but he's also Batman because IP. Like we would not have the film Witness. He could do that. He could do the modern equivalent of Witness, but that film isn't going to get made.
No.
And if it does get made, it's going to be like Strange Darling that no one hears about. Like Austin Butler came off the back of bloody Elvis,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
and no one bloody went to see the movie.
Yeah. In actual fact, we because
It's insane.
I put a thing on our social media on the Mean Street social media with the court stealing poster before I'd seen the film, before either of us had seen the film,
Mm,
because I'd just seen that it was Austin Butler and uh, Zoe Kravitz,
mm.
and it was a neo noir that was up and coming. It was about to be released, and I just said, "Is anyone looking forward to this?" Because Elvis versus Catwoman sounds like a good deal to me. And then Luke got in touch with me and said, "Yeah, we should really probably watch this if we're gonna, if we're gonna sort
Yes.
of put something out there about it. We should really, in case somebody says, 'Have you seen it?' and we sort of say no."
No.
So we went to watch it, and uh, we talked about it. But you're right, and that sort of is symptomatic. I've fallen into that trap. It's not Austin Butler and Zoe Kravitz. It was Elvis and Catwoman.
Hmm.
And they both deserve better than that, having seen that film.
Yeah.
So uh, I'm guilty of it as much as anybody else, I suppose, in that one moment. That
Yeah. I mean, so there are a few. I mean, I would say I'd say one of the few people who are able to get away with it would be people like Margot Robbie. She's able to do various things that are big, or
Emma Watson,
maybe even Ryan Gosling. He's got a pretty diverse filmography.
yeah,
From anything from things like Drive to The Notebook to I get now he's doing a big Star Wars film, but also The Nice Guys and Fall Guy
yeah,
and he's one that kind of Crazy Stupid Love. He kind of goes all over the place and does all sorts of stuff. But I think the general thing what we're trying to say here is that generally speaking, we're so IP focused that it's
yeah,
harder to get some of these people who could be really great and have a diverse filmography and be known for that, and have that sort of Harrison Ford, George Clooney kind
yeah.
of clout, Sandra Bullock kind of clout. They don't really have the opportunity in this current state, but maybe that will
Yeah.
change. That'd be
And maybe it'll
nice.
change because it's happened in the past. I mean, when Connery was brought back as Bond in Diamonds Are Forever, he
Mm,
said, "I'll do it as long as you fund two independent films that I want to make.
yes.
I'll do your Bond film if you let me do two films that I want to do and you
Mm,
fund it." And they said, "Well, yeah, fine, fair enough," because they knew Connery back as Bond was just going to go through the roof. And one of those films, I can't remember what the second one was. One of those films is a film called The Offense with Connery and Ian Bannon, where Connery is interviewing, in inverted commas, Ian Bannon, who is a suspect in a particular type of crime. And it's superb. It's visceral. It's tough. It's Connery without his toupee, and Connery with not anything like Bond. It's Connery as raw as he had been since taking on Bond, really. You know, and he looks as if he's on fire, and really working hard. And when you compare that to Diamonds Are Forever, see, you can tell the difference, sort of thing. And so, yeah, I think Connery had it right. I'll do your IP if you let me do this. Quid pro quo. And I think some of these actors could do something similar. So let's just take Robert Pattinson. He said, well, "I'll do your Batman too if I can star in Witness." You know, I think there's a scope for that to happen, but it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
mm-mm. No, not as much. Not as much. That whole sort of system of one for you, one for me doesn't really happen anymore. Robert
No.
Downey had that a little bit at one point before everything got out of hand because he did The Judge, which was a really good film.
Hmm.
Very emotional, very very strong, good performance. But then he just got stuck doing nothing but Marvel. There's a Mel Gibson film, but I can't remember which one it was. But I can't. There's one that was a one that he just wanted to do. That was I wish I could remember the name of it now, but it was it kind of falls into that same sort of shtick. But
Yeah.
there we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just going on IP there, just to support your point. I don't know if you've heard of the film called The Accountant with Ben Affleck and John Bernthal, and they
I
play
know the
brothers.
name. Yes, I know
Okay.
the name. I haven't seen it
Yeah.
though.
I mean, I've seen some of the film, but I remember watching a brief interview with Ben Affleck when he was being interviewed to like promote the film. And the interviewer, she said, "Oh, obviously you played Batman not too long ago, and John Bernthal's the Punisher." So she said, "Who would win out of a fight between those two?" And he, you could tell he was exacerbated from hearing the question.
Yeah.
Oh
I
God,
always like Harrison Ford's responses to questions like, you say, who would win, Han Solo or Indiana Jones? And he almost invariably says, I don't care. Except he doesn't quite say, I don't care. He says, I don't give a, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah,
Because, I mean, it is an inane question, isn't it? Why would either of them meet?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
Yes.
Crazy, it's mad. Are there any films that either of you two are looking forward to this year?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't
that's a
know.
good question.
Probably. I just
Yeah,
don't know what they
I
are.
don't know what they are yet. Yeah.
I'm the kind of I kind of don't sit there and necessarily look at everything that's going to come out. I sort of just let things happen, and then get surprised by things like Caught Stealing. It's like, okay, this is coming out. Okay, it looks good. I'll go and watch that. So I don't typically, with all things like books, comic books, films, even music. I just sort of stumble upon things, and that's just always been my method.
Yeah, I'm very similar. I don't sort of buy, Empire or Total Film or any film magazine to say what's coming. I don't do that anymore. Used to, but I don't now. Um, like Luke, I occasionally will see something by accident, and say, what's this? So, and as very often I'm late to the party. Um,
Mm.
Okay.
so I watched a film called Spotlight with Michael
Yes, I've
Keaton,
seen it. Yeah, I watched it at cinema. Yeah.
and I don't know what made I can't remember what made me watch it. Like, other than I was watching a documentary about that subject, and it just mentioned this film, and I thought I've never heard of it. I didn't even know it existed. So I googled it, and I thought, wow, this is a great cast for one thing. And I just sat down thinking of no expectations or anything, just one watched it and was absolutely blown away by it. And I thought, wow, intelligent filmmaking still happens. You know,
Mm.
it's not all men in capes and explosions, and laser guns. Thank heaven for that sort of thing. But I mean, I don't know what year Spotlight came out, but I know it's old now by comparatively speaking.
Mm.
Um, so very often I'm sort of catching up. Um, but again, this goes back to the marketing side of it. If I'd known Spotlight, if it been marketed as the market superhero films, I would definitely have been to see it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like Luke, I sort of stumble into these things and just find them by accident. Very
Yeah.
often, sometimes someone might say, "Look at this," go and have a look at this, and you think, "Well, what's this going to be like?" Put it on, you
True.
read the summary, and you think, "Oh, actually, this sound quite good." you
Yeah.
know,
I mean, there's certain things. I mean, I'm refreshing my memory now, and I'm like, I want to see the film Digger with Tom Cruise. That looked interesting. I'm keen to see that. But at the same time, we're talking this next year is full of things like Supergirl and Dune 3 and Shrek 5 and Toy Story 5 and Ice Age
Avengers.
50 and live action Moana and Avengers Doomsday, Spider-Man 4,
I mean,
28 years later, another Silent Hill movie, so it's tough. This is partly why I just sort of, I'm like I don't tape, another Meet the Parents movies coming out. Meet the Fockers 30.
Oh
you
my
know,
gosh.
it's
yeah,
it's tricky. So I just sort of I kind of ignore and just, I don't know, stumble upon stuff because I just find it easier that way and less depressing when I just go and look at, because I can't remember what it was. Someone posted something, I think, on Twitter where they were listing all the films coming out this year, and most of it was some sort of sequel or remake or reboot of some kind. And I tweeted about it, retweeted it, saying I'd really love to see like a proper graph of like a year on year comparison of like when did this become the dominance, because there were times in the past where there were lots of remakes and lots of like Sherlock Holmes films or things like that.
Yeah.
But it just feels like now there's just so much of it. All of the big movies that come out over every year are just the remakes, the reboots, the sequels, that's so I'd love to see someone do like an actual year by year graph to see is it just is it just me, or is it that yes, we are losing the original, the original movie for all of this.
I think a lot of it is to do with the money men not having whatever the word is, the guts, I suppose. They don't want to take a risk on something new.
Yeah.
So, for example, they won't put any money behind. If you went to one of these people and said, "I want to make a film about a teenage female detective who's a schoolgirl in Victorian London," they would say, "Not a chance. Make it Sherlock Holmes' sister, and we'll give you $100 million."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you think, well, no, because the concept should be good enough for you without the Holmes brand,
Mm.
you know? And I think that happens a lot. I think that happens more than it should. That people will say. There's a very famous story about Hugh Laurie. I think it's Hugh Laurie. And he wrote a novel and he sent it to a publisher under an assumed name and it got rejected all across the board.
Mhm.
Sent it in under his own name. All those who rejected it suddenly were offering him like, you know, multiple book deals.
Gosh.
He said if it's not good enough on its own right, if it's not good enough for John Smith, when John Smith wrote it, it's not good enough when
Mhm.
I'm sure it's Hugh Laurie. If it's not, I apologize, but it's
No,
certainly
no,
someone
that
famous.
was Hillary. I don't think
It-
he sent it in under his real name, and then it got picked up. I think it eventually got picked up under the fake name, and then when they found out who it
right,
was,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think they all the sharks
They
came.
all came
Nom, nom, nom,
swirling,
nom, nom,
right?
nom.
There you go. Well, the principle is the same,
Yes,
It
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
if it's
yeah.
good enough, and I think that happens a lot. And I think so when you see things like Enola Holmes, that's what things like that really get my goat. They really do because you think, well, this is neither respectful to the original stories, and nor is it good enough to be done in its own capacity.
But neither is Steven Spielberg's young Sherlock Holmes.
No, but that's good fun, isn't it?
Is it? Is it?
No, well,
Mm.
this new Watson TV series. I dared to watch the first episode, and I lasted, I think, just after the credits. I found it excruciating.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to make it, well, first of all, it's a knockoff of Doctor Watson. Secondly, it's a knockoff of House. To bring it back to Hugh Laurie,
Which was a spin on Sherlock
which
Holmes.
was a spin on Sherlock Holmes. I mean, talk about the snake eating itself.
Mm.
But going back to the original point, I think it's that sort of failure or inability or reluctance to take a risk on something new, and you forget, or they forget, that that something new might be this generation's
Yeah.
Star Wars, or this generation's Indiana Jones, or this generation's James Bond, or it might just be. But no, we won't do that because it's too risky. We'll do Spider-Man 30, and how many times do we need to see Bruce Wayne's parents get killed? How many times do we need to see Peter Parker get bitten by a spider?
Hey, at least
That
the Batman didn't actually show that.
well, quite, yeah, absolutely. One of the things I liked about it. One of
Mm.
the things I liked about
Well, I think you said in one of the episodes when you were reviewing Batman Caped Crusader
Mm.
that the
Ugh.
one biggest disappointment, I think, was at the end of the very last
it.
episode where
Yeah,
he started to introduce a Joker, and you think, we've been through this so many
been through
times.
this. Yeah, we did say that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So why?
And of
Why?
course, they did the
Yeah.
same thing in the Batman. And I've just read recently that the Joker is coming back for the Batman too. And I'm just like, stop.
Stop.
Two-Face as well is coming back. It's what's his name? Sebastian Stan. Looks like he's going to be playing Two-Face in
But
that
yeah,
film.
I guess it is more the same. We've already seen these characters, and that is, it does get exhausting, Whereas, I mean, I had the same problem even with the Batman. I thought, well, I've seen the Penguin, I've seen
Hmm.
the Riddler. Like, can you just finally do a different villain? We've seen the Catwoman. Just put someone new in your stupid movies, which I think is why I hold up the Batman Begins as one of my favorite
Me too.
because
Of
it's none of that.
yeah,
It's Falcone, it's what's his face,
Scarecrow.
Scarecrow,
Yep.
it's Ra's al Ghul. It's people we've never seen on the big
Of
screen, and it just was great. And then
yeah,
after that, it's oh we've got to bring Bane back out. All
yeah.
right.
Wheel Bane back out. Yeah. Of the three Nolan Batman films, Batman Begins is my favorite. I think
Yeah.
it's the best one
Yeah.
by a country mile. I
Mm,
mean, no, that people talk about the Dark Knight, but nah, Batman Begins for me because that's the one that really is, as Luke says, it's the one that takes the most risks in many ways, and it's
mm,
the one that feels most noir to me,
yeah.
and it's the one that feels most realistic and honest.
Mm,
And I like the idea of. I wouldn't be sorry if we only had that one film and it ended with him getting the Joker card, and you were left wondering
mm,
what that version of the Joker would be. I wouldn't be disappointed with that at all.
mm,
Not at all. I'd have been quite happy with that.
Yeah, yeah. I think what doesn't help is you don't get a lot of films now which are 30 million pound films in terms of budget. It's either low independent or maybe they are 10 million and then straight from there to 100 million. It's like if you're a
Yeah.
filmmaker, like how can you practice that way? If you understand what I mean, you need to go up the levels, I think, in terms of budget and experience that. But now you don't get those mid-budget films that you can use to experiment a little bit on. It's just either very, very small, even a short film to start with, or go straight from there to
mm.
100 million plus. And I just think, how
Yeah.
can you, yeah, how can
Was the
you,
last Indiana Jones film like £350 million budget?
God, yeah, and it was,
I
Yeah,
mean,
it was
that's just
something
never going to
stupid.
make its money back.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah,
not with what they were doing anyway.
Well, not
But a
with that
really good
script.
example of that is the Deadpool franchise. One that was struggling to get off the ground until Ryan Reynolds leaked the test footage
yeah,
during a Comic Con, and everyone lost their shit over it because it was like, wow, this is actually really good.
Yeah.
Make this into a film for real. And the initial budget for that was 58 million. That is a relatively small budget for a
Hmm.
superhero film, and it made them have to work within those confines. And Deadpool 1 is by far the best. And then by the time you get to Deadpool 3, he's joined the MCU. It's all over the place. It's Hugh Jackman is dug back out of the grave to play Wolverine again, and it's just a bloated, nonsensical. Everyone who was a main character is suddenly pushed aside so they can have this buddy romp, and then bring back I don't know, Elektra for whatever reason because she was such a hot ticket back in the early 2000s when her film came out, and in Daredevil. But I mean, I guess that they, it was fun to see Wesley Snipes' Blade come back, I guess, but it was just like, what are you doing? But again, that was like a huge, bloated budget movie. But it's like,
Yeah.
there's no reason, even if your film makes money, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to keep raising the cost of the sequel, except for covering salaries for the stars.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Like, increase your budget to cover that, not because you want to add more spectacle, in my opinion.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we've made this point several times on our podcast that the special effects should complement what's already there. It shouldn't replace it. And these films should be equally compelling without any of the spectacle because it should be about the characters, their relationships, and the situations they are in.
yeah,
You know, Indiana Jones is not a success. Raiders of the Lost Ark is not a great film because he has a hat and a whip and he jumps off a horse onto a truck.
Mm.
It's because of who he is and why he's jumping off that horse onto that truck and what makes him do that and what drives him to do it. And, why does he save the girl? Why does he go? Why does he put himself through all that? That's what's compelling. Not whereas I am sure that when they made what was the fourth one, Crystal Skull,
mm,
I think they thought as long as we see him in a hat with his whip, that'll be fine. They'll all go nuts for it. And that's just missing the point completely.
Well, I think
Missing the point completely.
I would say that's the fifth one. Crystal Skull is actually quite. It's not bad. It's
Well,
not
I've
as
not
bad
seen
as
it
what
for a long
people. It's not
time.
as bad as people. It's not as bad as people remember.
It
People were
can't be as bad
angry
as the
because of
fifth.
aliens, and they were mad because of aliens, some ropey CGI, and Shia LaBeouf, all of which have aged way better than anticipated. In at least in my opinion, I think Crystal Skull actually makes sense, as in like him dealing with aliens and stuff. It sort of tracks with with what Indiana Jones is doing anyway, because he's dealing with monsters and superstition and
Yeah, yeah,
otherworldly
I can
things.
buy that. I
You
mean,
know,
I still
um,
think it was ill-advised, but nevertheless,
there were
I
moments that's like dial some of these things back. There are cheesy bits in there, but really, what it was for me was when I watched Dial of Destiny. Dial of Destiny, like when I watched that in comparison, I was like, oh my god, Crystal
yeah.
Skull is actually at least a real Indiana Jones film, and Dial Up of Destiny is not.
Well, I'm going to confess now, exclusive. I haven't watched that because I can't bring myself to do it.
You set
Um,
yourself 2.5 hours. It's fine.
well, 2.5 hours is a long time for me. Um, but I, I suspect that if I did, I would agree that Crystal Skull is a work of genius. You know, by comparison, because I have seen enough clips and I have
Mm,
seen enough. I've read and heard enough reviews to make me think, what on earth have they done? You know.
yeah. The other thing that's really good on the 4K release of Crystal Skull is they got rid of the original release had this sort of weird greeny yellowy tint to it that just wasn't in any of the, so it didn't even look like an Indiana Jones
No,
film.
it didn't. It
They
didn't.
removed that, and now it actually looks like an Indiana Jones film,
Oh, well,
which
that's something.
also helps immensely.
Yeah, that's something.
Immensely.
But it's not about the costume. It's about who he is. That's why these films are compelling. That's the point we were making. Um, just as I suppose it's not about the Superman suit. It's about who is in it.
Yeah.
And he's Superman before he puts the suit on. So what the suit looks like is almost irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
As long as it's
Yeah.
vaguely classic. You know.
Yeah.
But do that with a lot of film. I mean, I've done it with Terminator. Should have stopped at two. Alien.
Oh,
Should have stopped at two. Predator. Should have stopped after the
Mm.
second one, which wasn't good as the first. So
which is the Terminator film where he does the sunglasses thing, but it's like pink stars. Is that
Oh,
three?
it might be three or
I think that's three.
I turned it off then. I
Fair
said I
enough.
don't need to watch this.
That's fair
Yeah,
enough.
it's bad with all of them. I mean, it's been a joy to talk to you both. I mean, again, thank you so much for coming on. Just quickly, would both each one of you recommend a film noir film that someone could watch that not an obvious one, but someone could watch and really enjoy?
Not
Uh,
not an obvious one.
Not an obvious one, so not like a Humphrey Bogart one or anything like that.
Murder My Sweet. I'm gonna go with Murder My Sweet. I know it's a Marlowe, but most people don't talk about it.
Oh, you see, I was going to say that. um, you see, I really want to say Out of the Past, but that is a big hitter.
Yeah.
Um, that's really tough. I'm gonna go with a really cheap, and I think we'll at some point we'll cover this on our podcast. I think it's a really cheap film noir made for about $10, and it's a film called Detour from 1945, I think. And it's got one of the most manipulative, cruel femme fatales of all, in my opinion, and it's got one of the biggest saps as the hero. um, and it's just pure noir. It's all about fate conspiring against you, and it's on for, believe it or not, about 65 minutes,
Hmm.
and it does so much in those 65 minutes. And I'm also going to recommend a British one called The Long Memory, which is John Mills, about a man who is framed for murder, and he comes out after 12 years uh, and seeks revenge, and that's really good.
I'll add The Pool of London.
Oh yeah, Pool of London. Yeah, definitely.
Excellent.
Cool. I mean, thank again. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. If people want to find out about more about podcasts, where can they go?
Well, we're everywhere. You can find us on all the major streaming places. So, our home is Podbean, but you can listen to us on Apple and Spotify and pretty much anywhere you get podcasts. We're on X stroke Twitter as Mean Streets PC. Um, Facebook, we have a Facebook page that you can come and hang out with us there too.
Yeah, Instagram we're on.
Instagram, we kind of post things there, but not much. But yeah, Facebook and X are the two main places to find us on social media if you want to talk to us. But if you want to listen, then yeah, we're on all the major streaming platforms.
In the description of this video, I'll put down a link to the Podbean so people can listen to
Cool.
your podcast.
That'd be great.
Cool. Matthew
Thanks,
and Luke, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you for coming on to the 286 Project.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. This was a lot
Thanks
of
for
fun.
having us on, Chris. Yeah, it's been fun.
Thank you very much. Take care.